We turn our attention now to Lesson 23 in Discipleship Essentials, called Walking in Obedience. Just imagine you are 2 lessons away from crossing the finish line. You've been on a great journey. And finish line is probably an appropriate image for this particular video, because we're going to be looking at one of the images of the Christian life is image of athletic competition. In this lesson, you're focusing on the process of change, the process of transformation. Paul introduces the image of a makeover. You are to take off the former attire that you had under the old way of life and put on an entirely new attire for the new way of life. And you will be introduced to the concept of the principle of replacement. You can't simply stop a bad habit. You need to replace it with something that is God-pleasing. So instead of further talking about the process of change here, I want to shift to the attitude in which we approach this process of change. What's the manner, attitude, or conviction in which we pursue the process of transformation? In the Great Commandment, Jesus tells us that we are to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, with all of our mind, with all of our soul, with all of our strength. And I think it's that word strength that really focuses in on the approach that we are to take to the process of transformation, because we are entering into the bodily or physical realm and harnessing our passions in that direction. The word that Jesus used here for strength is the Greek word ischouos, from which we get the word translated capacity, with all of our ability, with all of our power, harnessing the passions that God has put in our physical energy to pursue Him. And the Apostle Paul, I think, captures this emphasis and this thesis in his understanding of the Christian life. And if I were to summarize Paul's approach to the Christian life, I would use just simply one word. It's the word discipline. Discipline. Imagine that. Discipline and disciple connected to each other. Paul piles up images of athletes in training, soldiers under command, hardworking farmers. He loves words like training, self-control, working, labor, focused energy to describe life in Christ. And I think if the Apostle Paul were to open up a gymnasium, he would open up a Christian fitness center. He would have this training center. And if you were to get membership in this training center, what kind of attitude would you have to sign up for to be in Paul's gymnasium? Well, Paul tells us this because he uses the word training to describe the Christian life. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, he takes us into the realm of athletic competition. The Corinthian church was in the Isthmian Peninsula, and the Isthmian Games were held in that setting. And that's probably the backdrop to Paul's words here that I'm going to be reading to you. To be a part of those games, you had to train for 10 months to show that you were ready to participate. So Paul writes these words about the approach that we should take to our Christian life. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last. We do it to get a crown that will last forever. So I would submit that the Christian life is going into the training like you would train for an athletic competition. Practice, discipline, routine, repetition. I happened to live in Chicago in the early 2000s, shortly after the reign of Michael Jordan with the Chicago Bulls and all the championships that they won. And of course, he had a reputation of pulling the game out at the end, that final shot. Just give it to Jordan and he will make that final shot. Was it because he was more talented than everybody else? Great talent, obviously. But he also had the reputation of working harder than everyone else. He had the reputation of being the first in the gym and the last out. He applied his talent in a very powerful way. And note Paul's how much more argument here. He says if the secular world puts that kind of effort into athletic competition, how much more should we who will have a crown that will last forever put into our effort in following Jesus as well? So what's the attitude and the manner in which we approach this makeover that Paul talks about? How do we apply Paul's approach to discipline? I'm indebted to John Ortberg for a very helpful distinction in his book, The Life You've Always Wanted. He makes a distinction between trying to live the Christian life and training to live the Christian life. And there's a huge distinction and difference between trying and training. In trying, you're dabbling. Let's give it a shot. See what we can do. You flip from one thing to another. But there are many things that a trying mentality will not accomplish for you. I don't think anybody will wake up on a Saturday morning, open up the newspaper to the sports section, see that they're running a marathon today. You check your watch and say, I've got some time. I think I will give it a try. No, you would not do that. You would have to train for months on end to be ready to run the 26 miles in whatever length of time it took you to do that. At some time in our life, we all know that you have to adopt a training mentality to get to where you want to go. Whether it's your profession, whether it's apprenticeship to become a plumber, whatever it may be, you have to put in the hours and preparation to do that. And we understand that in our life. But sometimes we don't transfer that same kind of understanding to the Christian life. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book around this same thing called Outliers, the Story of Success. And he poses the question, is it simply talent that makes people successful? Or are there other elements that contribute to it? And I think you would summarize his formula like talent plus preparation, I would say perspiration, equals achievement. There are plenty of talented people who do not achieve because they do not put in the effort. And one of the studies he shares in this book, which I found rather fascinating, was the study of violinists at the Berlin Elite School of Music. And after they studied these violinists, they divided the students into three categories. Those who were the potential concert violinists, those who they called the merely good, and those who would probably end up teaching music in public school. And in the study of them, they simply asked all the students simply one question. When you first started violin, how many hours have you put in over that time? And most of the students had started at about age 5, and now they were about age 20. They found out that those who were going to teach in public school had put in about 4,000 hours. The merely good had put in about 8,000 hours. But those who were to be the concert violinists had already put in 10,000 hours. And they documented this 10,000 hour rule that said that it takes about that long to master in your body and in your mind the skills necessary to become great at what you do. So it takes this kind of effort to excel, even in the Christian life. We need to approach it in that fashion. John Ortberg writes this: spiritual transformation is not about trying harder, but training wisely. The need for preparation for training does not stop when it comes to learning the art of forgiveness or joy or courage. In other words, it applies to healthy and vibrant spiritual life just as it does to physical and intellectual activity. Learning to think, feel, and act like Jesus is at least as demanding as learning to run a marathon or play the piano. I have one quibble with that quote. Learning to think and feel and act like Jesus is not at least as demanding. It is far more demanding than learning to play the piano or becoming a brain surgeon. That's the kind of effort that we need to put into our Christian life. So let me ask you, are you trying or are you training to live the Christian life? I think many of us have viewed the Christian life as simply a transaction that we have entered into with Christ. We acknowledge our need for forgiveness. He has given us his righteousness and forgiven us, and therefore we are good to go. There's no need to train to live the Christian life if that's our view of what the Christian life is. If it's all about receiving the benefits, where's the commitment to become a follower of Christ? But if it's about followership, if it's transformation into Christ's likeness, if it's receiving the benefits and then seeing those benefits turn ourselves into a one who loves Jesus more and more, we know that that is the highest calling and the most difficult thing they're able to do. So we need that kind of discipline to approach the Christian faith. Of course, then, a training mentality will lead to what? A training regimen. If you are having a goal to become something and you are training to do that, then you have practices that you have put in place. So let me take us back to the very beginning of our time together. After our first two lessons on what is discipling and who is a disciple, we looked at 4 spiritual disciplines or elements of our training regimen that we could put in place. You might recall quiet time, Bible study, prayer, and worship as 4 of those elements, and we talked about the practices that we could do. How are we doing at those? Let me put this positively. What have been the positive, joy-filled experiences we've had with those in our life? Now, why do I put it that way? We will only continue practices if over the long haul they are giving us joy and they are fulfilling. If it's simply drudgery, we will not carry on with those. So I want you to take a few moments after this video and talk with each other in your group about what are the practices that you are carrying on in terms of the disciplines of your faith. How are you feeling about them? Are there things that you need to recommit yourself to in your own life? I know even as I was doing this video, I was reviewing myself. One particular thing, and that was what I call an arrow prayer. I recall that I used to say this almost every day, and now I'm starting to say it again. My arrow prayer is this: Father, may the Spirit of Jesus flow through me. And now I'm saying it throughout the day as I remind myself of who I am. That's a discipline that I've reincorporated into my regimen of the Christian life. So take a few moments to do this right after we're done. And let me conclude with another John Ortberg quote. He's getting a lot of play in this particular video. Following Jesus simply means learning from him to arrange my life around activities that enable me to live in the fruit of the Spirit. Spiritual disciplines are to life what practice is to the game. One more time. Following Jesus simply means learning from him to arrange my life around the activities that enable me to live in the fruit of the Spirit. Spiritual disciplines are to life what practice is to the game. Let's go for it. Let's play that game with all the energy that we possibly can. Amen.